It's a pitched two-player battle with shells raining down from the sky and fully destructible terrain. It's Artillery Duel, an original new game from Chromeworks, and I'm going to teach you how to make it right now. Hey, and welcome back to the Chromeworks studio in beautiful Ottawa, Canada. I'm Andrew Tomek, your technology teacher, back with another great coding lesson for you. So this week we're doing an original game that I've made up myself this week. It's called Artillery Duel, and it's a fun little two-player game where you move back and forth across the board, trying to lob missiles onto each other. An interesting feature here that I've added is destructible terrain, which I'm going to teach you how to do using the pen tool today. So that's an interesting little feature that I'll be talking about in a little bit. Let's have a look at our starter file. So this is a starter file that has all the graphics and sound effects you need to make this project yourself at home. As always, you'll find this file link in the description here, or you can go to my website, chromeworks.ca, and find the link there as well, and you'll be able to play the finished game from that link as well. So let's have a quick look around at the sprites and the different assets that I've created here. So there's two cannons in the game, a blue one and a red one. You'll see that almost all the features here are duplicated twice. We've got the cannon, we've got a cannonball. It's just a simple little circle sprite. Then we've got a wheel. I separated the wheel from the cannon barrel so that we can tilt the cannon and keep the wheel fixed in place on the ground. I've got a little directional arrow here that we can use to point which direction the cannon's going to go in. It's going to give you some indication of what the power is that you're able to deploy as you lob these missiles. You're going to be able to control how far they go. And we've got a health bar here as well. And I've got some other little assets, but nothing too significant. Let's get started with the coding here. So the first mission here is we want to hook up the cannon to the wheels here so they both move simultaneously. Okay, so let's start with the blue cannon, P1 cannon here. And let's get a starting position for it. So it's already in the approximately correct position, so we'll put a green flag here. We'll grab our motion blocks, and we've got an X of -220, which will put it to the left, and the Y is around -161, give or take. Let's point it up a little bit. We'll tell it to point in direction 60, and that will get it tilted up into a starting position where it looks like it's ready to shoot. All right, and we're going to just move. So our left character is going to move with WASD, and our right character is going to move with arrow keys. So let's go ahead and get that movement scheme implemented here. I'm going to grab a forever, and inside there I'm going to grab an if statement, and I'm going to say if key D is pressed. So that's going to be our right hand movement key. We're just going to change our X coordinate by 2. So that'll just move us slowly to the right when we hit the D key. And for the left, I'm just going to duplicate this, and we'll go when I select A, we'll go -2 here. Beautiful. So as you can see, my cannon barrel is moving, but the wheels aren't moving with it. So let's go over and address the wheel situation. You notice that I took the wheel graphic and moved it a little bit off center. There's the center of the screen here, you can see. And so that when I tell it to go to the cannon, this center area will go to the cannon, which will offset it a little bit and make it look like the cannon and the wheel are aligned properly. So over on the wheel sprite here, we're just going to say when green flag clicked. Let's just make sure it's visible. We'll do a show. Not sure whether we need that or not. We'll tell it to go to the front layer because it always has to be in front of the barrel. And we're going to tell it to constantly go to where P1 cannon is. So let's tell it to go to using a blue movement block. Here's the one that says random position. I'm going to pull down the menu here and grab P1 Cannon. There we go. So that'll send it constantly on top of my guy. Let's click the green flag again. As you can see, this is looking a little bit better now. A little bit high in the air. I might change that Y coordinate for these guys. Maybe Y of minus 170. Let's see what that looks like. It's a little bit low, eh? Try 165. There we go. That looks pretty good. Or maybe 166, just one more pixel down. There we go. That's looking good now. All right. So we're moving properly. Now we want to constrain our movement. We don't want to be able to bash into, so we've got a mountain in the middle here. These mountains are actually a background, and we change to some different versions of them as we go through. Every time we kill an opponent, we have 3 lives in this game. We're going to basically switch to a new backdrop and reset the map again. It's very important this be a backdrop. I like usually to make my background scenery a sprite so that I can hide it and use ghost effects to fade in and fade out. But in this case, it's very important that it be a backdrop because we're going to be painting on top of this, and the paint tool only works on backgrounds in Scratch. So an important tip here for creating our destructible terrain. Okay, so we're good to go here with our cannon. We're moving properly. So what we're going to do is tell it that when it touches this brown color, it's going to move backward, which is going to counter this forward movement, and in the end we'll be frozen there. So let's grab an if statement here, and we'll say if touching color. And we want to grab that brown color, so I'm going to click on the color bubble here and grab an eyedropper tool and click on the brown of the mountain so that we've selected the exact color. So if I'm touching that color, we're going to basically take this X movement to the right, and we're going to negate it by changing my X by -2 in the other direction. And you'll see when I start my game here now that my tank will keep moving until it hits the wall, and then it'll just stop. Beautiful. I don't have to do this for leftward movement because there's only always going to be an obstacle in front of us. Nothing's ever going to be behind us here. We can blast away this terrain and keep moving into it, but there's never going to be anything behind us. So we don't need to worry about that other direction. Okay, so now let's change the tilt angle of the gun. And that, of course, will be our W and our S keys that control that. So I'm going to grab an if statement here, and I'll say if key W is pressed. Whoop, there's our W. Then we're going to turn counterclockwise, so it's going to rotate around this way. So let's grab a turn counterclockwise button. We'll just turn it 1 degree at a time. Seems like a good amount. And I have a little rotation sound here. Let me show you what that sounds like. I grabbed this from freesound.org, my favorite free website for audio. And yeah, once we get this going, you'll see how it works. It's actually quite cool. So let's go to our sounds commands here. We'll go start sound, rotate, and we need to keep track of which direction this is because our bullets and other things are going to actually, or sorry, our cannonballs are going to be aligned according to this angle here. And so we need to save this information as a variable so that we can use it elsewhere. So I've created a variable here called angle. We're going to set our angle to whatever the current direction is. So I'm going to grab direction here for my blue blocks, and that will make sure that angles always align with whichever direction my cannon barrel is facing. All right, before we test this out, we're going to do the down version of it. So I've just duplicated these this little chunk of blocks here. Let's go grab a letter S and tell it to turn. Now we could turn in the opposite direction, or we can go turn -1 degree, which basically does the same thing. You're welcome, of course, if you find that confusing, to grab this turn clockwise button, which does the same thing. We're going to set sound rotate and set the angle to direction again here. All right, so let's have a look at our game one more time. So you can see that as I hit my W and S key, oh, let's start that up again. There we go. That sounded like I'm changing the elevation of my gun. Beautiful. All right, so let's move on to our cannonball now, and this is where we get into a little bit of the physics of this. So I'm going to click on P1 cannonball here. You can see that in the starter file, I've given you a little bit of code in advance. As I've said here in my note, this is the physics behind how to move this cannonball, and it uses some trigonometry functions, the cosine and the sine function. This is way beyond your pay grade, boys and girls. This is something that's a little bit more complicated than you probably need to mess with. So I've just given you the code. So you just trust me that this code will get your cannonball moving in kind of the arc that we want it to, where it goes flying up on the screen, slows down, and then comes back down again. I'm not going to bother explaining this to you because it's just a little bit more complicated than you need it to, but you can certainly grab this same code and reuse it for any kind of project where you need stuff flying through the air and kind of dropping to the ground. And I'll show you how this fits into the rest of the code in just a second here. So we're going to fire with the Q key. Let's go grab an event that says when I click the Q button. So I picked Q because it's right next to WASD and seems like it's easy to get to. And now we're going to be playing around with the size. My explosion graphics are a little bit big, we kind of resize things. Our graphics here are the cannonball, and then the couple explosion graphics, which I've kind of resized later on here. And then there's these weird blue blotches here. They're all different shapes. And I'll be showing you what those do in a second, but this is basically how we're going to be erasing the background inside of this block, or inside of this game, sorry. Okay, so when I press the Q key, we're going to set our size to 100%. Now we've got a variable called power, which will determine how powerful our shots are. The default here is 15. You're not actually going to see this number. You're just going to see an arrow come out that's going to get longer the farther away we're shooting. But so the minimum power we're going to have here is 15, and I'll show you how that works in a second. So we're going to hold down that Q button to toggle through the different power settings. What's going to happen is it's going to start at 15, and as we hold the button down, it's going to go 16, 17, 18, until it gets up to 25. And then we're going to make it go back down to 15 again. And so as you're holding that button, you're going to be able to see that your gun will get more powerful until it gets to the maximum point, and then it'll come back down to 15 again. All right, so we're going to do a repeat until here. I'm going to grab that repeat until block. And we're going to say repeat. So we've pressed the Q button, and now this is going to keep running until I let go of the Q button. So we're going to repeat until the Q button is not pressed. And that was basically the same as when the button is released. That's what we're looking for here. So let's grab our sensing block here and put a Q in there. So this is a great way to do a button that works when it's been released instead of when it's been pressed. And that stops you from accidentally double clicking on a button. So it's a great way to do a fire button as well if you're worried about people holding down that fire key and firing multiple times. There's a lot of ways to use this function to stop your players from doing repetitive actions, because you can't let go of something twice, right? You have to repress it, and so that's a clever little hack to control your players' behavior. Okay, so what we're going to do in here is we're going to change our power. So let's go to our variables. We'll change power by 1 every time, or while we're holding this down. We've got a little sound effect here. It's just the standard suction cup sound. I'm going to go start sound, suction cup. And so every time that this gets changed, we're going to play that little sound. And we're going to do a little wait here. I'm just going to wait 0.1 seconds. And so you can see when I press the Q button, we get that repeated clicking sound. It's going to let us know that the power is changing. Okay, and as the power changes, we're going to change that power variable. So we want to max it out at 25. So I'm going to say if power is equal to, grab that power block here. If power is equal to 25, then we're going to reset it back to 15 again. So set power to 15. There are different ways to do this, but this is the simplest way to code this so that it keeps toggling from 15 up to 25 and then back down to 15 again. All right. So this is all going to keep going until we let go of that power button, and then it's going to fire. So let's do our firing motion here. We're going to go to our sounds. We're going to start the sound called tank firing. It's a lovely little shooting sound I got from freesound.org. Crank that volume a little here. There we go, a lovely tank firing sound. And we want to make sure that our costume here is in the cannonball configuration. So let's change that costume under our looks command here to say cannonball. And we're going to make it invisible later on. So let's make sure it's switched on so that it's visible. And we want it to start at this location where P1 cannon is. So let's tell it to go to P1 cannon. And we want it pointing in the same direction. So we want this cannonball pointing in the same direction that our cannon is going. So we're going to use that variable we just created called angle. And I'm going to pop that into a point in direction command here. Point in direction angle. And so then our bullets will go in the same direction as our cannon is pointed, of course. All right. Now, our bullets are going right to the center of the cannon, which means they're going to fire from the middle of the cannon. You'll be able to see a cannonball here going up the barrel of the cannon, which is not very realistic. So before it has a chance to move here, we're going to say move 20 steps in the direction that you're pointing. And what that'll do is instantaneously teleport it to the end of the gun barrel so that it'll start at the right spot. And now, here's where we use these two trigonometry functions here. I'm going to drop them in here. So we've got a variable called x velocity and one called y velocity. And so this cosine and sine basically figure out what the new x coordinate is going to be of something that's moving at a certain angle. That's kind of all that this math really does. It's using the magic of triangles, trigonometry, to figure out x and y coordinates. And in math, you're going to learn a lot more about this. I believe probably around grade 11 you get into this stuff, depending on what jurisdiction you're living in and how their curriculum's set up. But it's a fairly advanced math function that you really, most of the kids who are watching this are kind of 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. And this is a little bit too advanced for you guys, so I'm not going to ask you guys to understand what's going on here. All right, so let's do a repeat until touching edge. So this is going to be the movement of our cannonball here. We'll go to control, we'll go repeat until touching edge. So this will just keep the cannonball moving and moving and moving until we get to the edge of the screen. If it collides with something else along the way, then we'll of course get broken out of this little loop. But for now, we're just going to assume that we're not hitting anything. All right, so our cannonball is going to go in the direction that the cannon's pointing at that angle, but we want it to slowly bleed off height due to gravity. So we're going to add a little bit of gravity here by changing the variable called y velocity. So let's change y vel. Now I played with a whole bunch of different numbers, and you can feel free to tweak this a little bit, but I used minus 0.9 here as the gravity function. So the y is going to go down a little bit with every step until it forms kind of a curving shape here. All right. And now let's go ahead and actually add code in the movement. We changed our variables. We haven't changed our movement yet. So let's change our x by our x velocity. And we'll change our y by our y velocity. And I think that's all we need to get working here. So let's give it a test. I'll hit my Q button. Okay, so something's a little bit off here. Okay, I'm not sure where I did that, but I added a set angle to 15 here under the Q, and that was not supposed to be there. I'm not sure where that even came from. I think the gremlins are loose here. So I'm just going to drag that into the trash can, and we're going to want to set our power. Oh, it's setting our power. That's the thing. I set the wrong variable here. So we're setting power to 15 as our default. And this is going to fix our shooting right up, as you'll see here. So let's change our elevation, and we'll hit the Q button and fire. And you can see if I hold the Q button down a little longer, it'll shoot a little farther. If I hold it down a little bit, there we go. Now, we're not seeing our power. We need some feedback to let us know how much power we have, and we're going to do that with this arrow button. So I'm going to show you how that works right now. The one thing we're going to want to do first, though, is when we're out of this loop, after we're done shooting, we just want to hide that bullet again, so because we don't need it anymore. So let's go hide. All right, so let's get over to our arrow key, and we'll program that next. I'm going to go to P1 arrow. And in there, let's grab a green flag and a forever. And I'm going to say, so we're keying in on the Q button. We're going to wait for the Q button to be clicked here. And when I fire, we're going to have a whole bunch of, while I'm holding down that button, this arrow is going to move in a very specific way. So I'll explain that in a second here. We're going to go key Q. So when I hit my fire button, we want this arrow to be superimposed underneath the cannon, pointing in the same direction of the cannon and getting longer the farther our range is set here. So we're going to do a couple of things here to pull that off. The first thing, just to make it look a little slicker here, we're going to set the ghost effect to 50. We want it to be a little bit transparent so that we can see that's not a part of the actual game, but part of the game interface. We're going to tell it to go to back layer so that it's behind the cannon. We're going to tell it to point in the same direction as our angle. So point in direction, angle. We're going to tell it to keep going to the cannon. So let's go to P1 cannon. And so again, we want that arrow to start at the end of the cannon rather than right on the cannon. So again, we're going to move this. In this case, we're going to go minus 20 steps because it's actually sticking out a little bit beyond. So the way that our arrow is set up here, let me show you. It's actually away from the center here. So we're pulling it backwards so that it's starting inside the cannon and then forcing it outwards as that variable goes up. I'll show you what that looks like right now. So as our variable goes up, as our power variable goes up, we're going to move that number of steps. Now we want to exaggerate that movement a little bit, so I'm going to multiply it by 2. Let's grab a multiplication command here. So I'm going to move by power times 2 steps. Grab that power variable. And this is actually an if-else statement. Sorry, I've messed that up again here. Let's grab an if-else. We'll put all the contents into the top part. And the only thing we want in our else statement here is when we're not hold down our Q key, we want this to disappear. We could hide it here, but I'm just going to set the ghost effect to 100 here, and that'll be as good as invisible. All right, let's see what that looks like here. So now when I hold down my Q key after I've started the game, you can see that arrow appears. Oh, it is hidden right now. Let's make it visible. I've just hidden a bunch of these assets just to keep them out of the way. So there's my arrow. And let's try that one more time. It's white. I believe I have changed my brightness effect instead of my ghost effect here. Aha. All right. Let's try that again. Green flag. So change my elevation. Then I hold down that Q button. And you can see there's the arrow key. And you can see that it gets longer and longer and longer until it hits that 25 point, and then it gets short again. So if I want to shoot far, I hold it out like that. And if I want to shoot short, I do it until the arrow is quite short like that. And this way I can quickly, just using a single key, toggle between the different power states. And that's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. All right, we're actually done with this arrow. And let's go back to our cannonball here again and give it a little bit of artificial intelligence now to be able to blast through these walls and to collide with our friends as well. With our, not really our friends, our enemies. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is let's do this this collision with the brown mountaintop here. So I'm going to grab an if statement. I'm going to say if I'm touching that brown color, again, I'm going to click on the eyedropper and click inside the brown here to select the exact right color. And I'm going to say if I'm touching that color brown, we're going to do a couple of things. I'm actually going to put all of the functions that happen when we smash into this brick, into this mountainside, into a custom block here. So I'm going to go to My Blocks and create a new custom block that I'm going to call Demolish. All right, so I'm going to go through that demolish script in a bit, but the first thing we want to do is just stop all of this. Once we've hit the wall, we don't need our cannonball script to be working anymore, so I'm just going to make sure that it stops itself here by grabbing a stop all and changing it to stop this script, and that will make sure that we don't accidentally re-trigger this cannonball with anything that we're doing here. In some earlier versions of the game, the cannonball hit the wall and then went back to the cannon and then shot again 2 more times. And just one of those weird, unexpected things that happens sometimes. So we want to cut off this script just to make sure that that we haven't coded any holes in this that'll make our cannon behave in unexpected ways. Okay, so demolish. What are we going to do here? There's a bunch of stuff we need to do this explosion and make it look good. So all our graphics are a little bit too big compared to the cannonball here. If I'd planned this better, that wouldn't have happened, but we can just fix that all up with a resizing command here. We're going to set size to 50% from here. And we've got a sound for when we fire the cannon and another one for when the cannon hits things. So that sound effect for hitting things is called shell. I'll play it for you right now. That's a cool little sound. Kind of the sound of a shell whizzing through the air and then hitting the ground in the distance. I really like that sound, so that'll work quite nicely. Again, that's from freesound.org. All right, let's go start sound. Shell. And now we're going to go get into this explosion costume. So let's go switch costume to explosion. And that'll change our shell to a lovely explosion graphic. And we're going to go through 3 different costumes here. We're going to have a 0.1 second delay between them. So we're just going to go next costume, or we could specify the costume, but we know it's going to be the next costume. And so switch costume, next costume, and we're going to wait. There we go. So we're going to flip through all the costumes. You can't see them right now because they're invisible. Let me show that to you right now. Well, that's way out right here, so let me move it in the middle here. So this is what our explosion is going to look like. We'll start with the cannonball costume. And you'll see when I trigger this is what the explosion is going to look like. Beautiful. All right, so that disappears at this point. And we switch to the next 3 costumes of these mask costumes. I'm going to show you how they work in a second. But we don't want all of them. We're not cycling through them. We just want to pick one of these. So we've got costume 5, 6, and 7 here. We're just going to tell it to pick a random one of these costumes. So let's go switch costume 2, and we're going to pick a random number from 5, 6, or 7. So from 5 to 7, and so it'll just pick one of those. The reason I made a bunch of different costumes here so that the damage would look a little bit different each time we hit, because there's a bit of chaos and these explosions depending on what's got hit and where and what angle things hit at. We want the explosion area to look a little bit irregular. So what's going to happen is this explosion is going to end up hitting the edge of our object here when we touch the brown, and then it's going to go through its animation, then it's going to change to this blue part, and we're going to use a drawing command. So we've got our pen tools loaded here. We went into our pen utility and loaded our pen tools, and one of these tools here is called the stamp tool. I don't know if you've seen the stamp tool before. We haven't used it too often, but what it basically does is it turns that sprite into a little rubber stamp that we can place down on different objects. Let me grab a cat here just to demonstrate how that works. So if I grab a cat and plunk it down here and then click on the stamp, you can see when I move my cat out of the way, the duplicate of the cat, the bitmap, has been painted onto the background. Now it doesn't work on sprites, and that's why you're seeing this irregularity here. If I do it on top of my cannon, for example, you'll see that I stamp. Let's try that one more time. Stamp. And you can see that it's on the background, but not on the sprite. So that's why we've painted our mountains onto the backdrop instead of making them a sprite, so that we can paint on top of them. We're just going to paint on top of them with a sky color, and that's going to remove our background. So when we want to get rid of all this, we just go erase all, and that'll get rid of all these stamps. I'm going to delete my cat here. And so we've picked one of the blue costume, and it's just going to paint itself on top of the mountain and basically erase it, and that's how that's going to work. All right, I think we're almost done here. So we're going to stamp down here. Then we're going to switch our costume back to a cannonball again, because we'll need that for next time we fire. Switch costume to cannonball. We're going to send it back to the cannon again, so go to P1 cannon. And let's have it hide so that it's ready to go for the next time. All right, well, let's give this a try and see if we can blast into this mountainside a little bit here. So let's change our elevation. We will shoot, hold down our fire button, and there we go. And there you go, we've hacked a nice little piece out of the mountain. Let's try lobbing it from a great height and see what that looks like. Max out our power here. Uh-oh, I actually, let's try upping the angle a little bit more. And we'll fire one more time here. There we go. And as you can see, we're getting some nice little chunks cut out of the mountain. This presents all kinds of strategic opportunities for your game. You might want to blast away at the ground here and actually just try and get to your character by shooting him directly. So we could theoretically burrow our way all the way through this mountain and try to get to our red opponent that way. We can also create a little kind of umbrella here that will protect us. So we could be lobbing stuff onto our enemy from here. And then if our bullets come in our way, we can hide underneath the cover here and use that to protect ourselves. So a couple of different strategic possibilities this all presents. I just thought it would make the game a little bit more interesting. Okay, so we are doing great here. I don't know if there's a whole lot else here that needs to be done in this sprite. I think we're basically good to go now. So, when I stop and reset, so the one thing we haven't done here is we haven't reset our background for when we restart the game, and that's going to be over in the backdrop area here. So let's click over on our backdrop. And we got a couple of different blocks here. I haven't actually erased these from the starter file, so they're still here. So when green flag clicked, we're going to switch the background to that first background, and we're also going to erase our backdrop from here. So I'm going to do my pen tool and go erase all. And we were also erasing our backdrop before we switched to the next backdrop. So every time that we get damage to this event here that we're going to use in a little bit called health, and so that will switch us to our next backdrop. But you can see that if we switch backdrops here without erasing our blue mask blocks, we're going to have our backdrops pre-damaged. So we're going to want to erase all to get rid of that. And then we can actually go through all our different backdrops that way. So that every time somebody gets killed, we can have a different background and kind of reset the map that way. Okay, so we're making good progress here. Let's go on and code collisions with our cannonball. So I'm going to go back to my cannonball here. There is another if statement that we're going to need in here. So if touching color, we also need one for if we're touching player 2. So let's go ahead and grab that. If touching, let's go to our sensing blocks, touching player 2 cannon. Then we're going to broadcast that message that says health. And that's going to take away 1 from our health bar. Now, the way that I set this up, the health event will change player 2's health, just because that was the first one that I coded, because I started with my blue character shooting and he was shooting at the red character, of course. We're going to use that we're going to reuse that demolish script here as well. Broadcast demolish, and so we're going to have a little explosion here on top of this thing. It's not going to cover up our sprite though, as you remember, because it's a sprite, it's going to be in front of that blue part, so it won't do any damage to our character here. And again, we're going to stop the script here. So let's go Control, stop this script, and there we go, we're good to go. So now we can actually do damage to our character. We don't have the damage implemented on the other side though. We have a health bar that I've created here. We might as well get that going before we test this out. So here's P1 health and here's P2 health. So I'm going to go over to P2 health and code that one right now. So when the green flag is clicked, we're going to show, and we're going to make sure we're wearing the right costume. So let's go switch costume to costume 1. So the costumes on this are just our way of making the health bar go up and down. As you can see, we've got a couple of different states here. Our first damage, second damage, third damage, and lastly, we're dead here. So basically the equivalent of hit points, and we're using graphics to do that, which is kind of a cool little thing. I haven't done this in a project before, I think. All right, we're going to switch to costume 1. And now when I receive a damage, when I receive health, we're going to go to next costume here, which will take us to our next damage state. And under our green flag here, we're going to have it start to detect if which costume we're wearing, and if we get to that last costume, we're gonna have a death event here. So let's just grab a forever. We'll pop it in there, and we're gonna go if costume number equals 5. So costume number I can find are my looks commands here. Costume number equals 5. Then we're going to broadcast a message that says defeat. So under events, we'll broadcast defeat. There you go. And that is going to make a game over screen appear in a little bit. I've already coded a lovely game over screen, which I'll show you guys right now. There it is, player 1 wins. We're going to have to hide this other stuff here before that happens, though. So let's go back to our P2 health here with a few more things we have to do. Like when I receive health, when I receive defeat. So actually, no matter who gets defeated, we're going to want to hide the thing. So when I receive defeat, we're going to hide. But we also want to hide if we receive a message. I clicked the wrong thing there. If I receive a message called defeat 2, which is the other side losing, the blue team losing, defeat. There we go. Okay. And so when I receive defeat 2, hold it. I thought I typed that in. New message. Defeat 2. I'm not quite sure what I did there. All right, when I receive defeat 2, I'm going to hide. Excellent. Okay, so I think we're done with this guy, with this health bar. We're just going to drag all of this code back over to the other health bar so that they're both running. We might as well do that right now. I will make some modifications so that it works with player 1 as well. So these things are all stacked up on top of each other, but if I right click and go clean up blocks, it'll stack them up nicely. So what do we have to change here? We're going to broadcast defeat 2 if we get killed here, because it's the other character who's going to die. And the rest of it's all good, actually. When I receive defeat or defeat 2, yeah, so that's all perfect. Okay, so let's see if our health bars are working properly now. We'll go when green flag clicked. I'm going to hide that P1 win command because we don't need it yet and it's not coded properly. So let's go when green flag clicked. Let's change my elevation. Fire! Gonna take a couple of shots to get around here. Maybe with some tricky angling, I could get it going faster. There we go. There, beautiful. And you can see that both of us got damaged. Okay, that's no good. Let's try that one more time. You can see that our costume changed here. Yeah, so we're both getting damaged every time. I've obviously done something wrong here. So we're going to say, let's go back to our cannonball. If touching P2 cannon, we're going to broadcast a health message. And when I get that health message, oh, yeah. We don't want the same health message for both these characters. So let's go to P2 health. That should be next costume, but we want this one to say health 2. There we go. That should work better here. Let's try that one more time. And hopefully just one of us will be injured here. Oh, so close. Try that one more time. Beautiful. There we go. And that's perfect. And P2 has been damaged and P1 hasn't been, so we're in good shape here. All right, so I think we are ready to start coding player 2, and that's going to be a bunch of drag and drop and some minor modifications to get things going. So there's a lot of repetitive stuff that's going to be happening here as we're copying code over to create our second canon character. So almost all of this code is pretty much identical across the two sprites. And so I'm just going to really quickly give you an overview of what you have to change to go through here. And you should be able to do this part on your own. So I'm going to go over to P2 Canon here where I've already finished it. You can see that all the references to variables here, anything that says power or angle or velocity, all have to be changed to the P2 version of that. So I've got a different version of each one of these 4 major variables that we're using in the game here, and each one of them, it has to be changed. So here under green flag for the cannon, for example, it says P2 angle, and if we go through here, you'll see that there's a couple of other things that we've changed as well. P2 angle here, P2 angle here, and it just goes on through here. The cannonball changes in the same way as well. It's just the names of the variable have changed. P2 power, P2 x velocity, P2 y velocity, etc. here. And a couple of other things to watch out for, like our movement. We're moving with we're doing our collision detection when we go to the left rather than when we go to the right. So I've changed all my movement keys here to arrow keys, and I've made the collision detection with the brown happen when we're moving to the left, and that makes a lot of sense here. There's a couple of other blocks that I hadn't coded before I was ready to go here, which is the P2 win screen here. There's a screen here for if player 1 wins and a different one if player 2 wins. And you can see each one has a different character being exploded. And so what you basically have to do is go through every single one of these P2 sprites and change all the references to P2. You have to change all the events to say defeat 2 here, for example, under P2 win, and change the fire key here inside the arrow. Just a whole bunch of minor changes you're going to have to make. There's one other little bit of coding that we have to do. So your P1 win and your P2 win, we haven't done that yet. So basically when green flag clicked, we're going to have the winning screen go to the middle and hide. And when it receives that defeat message, it's going to show the defeat 2 message here for P2's character that you'll have to modify as well. And the last thing that I haven't shown you how to do is we just have a little bit of cloud cover going. Okay, so this is the finished version of the game. You can see we've got some background music and we've got clouds flying across the screen here. Let me show you the cloud functions here. We've just got one cloud sprite, but we want 2 of them going across the screen. You could go with 3 if you wanted to. So when green flag clicked, we're going to make a clone, and so we'll have 2 different clouds going across the sky. They're going to go to the back layer, point to the right, and they're just going to move very slowly at a speed of 1 across the screen. If they get all the way off the screen, which I calculated was an X coordinate of 325, which is right off the screen, we can go higher than 240 here because it's such a big object. So if you've got a large object that you're trying to move off the screen, you're allowed to go past that 240 limit. So I just let the thing run until it hit a wall and then took note of what the X coordinate was. And I told it when it got to that point, it can flip back to the far left side of the screen at the same coordinate. I did the same thing for the clone, except it's moving at half the speed at a speed of 0.5 steps, so that the 2 overlap each other. Here, my backdrop, I have a really cool little music track that's called background music, and that is something that I grabbed from freesound.org as well. It's called Civil War Field Loop, and it's by a music producer named D.D. Mizik or Mizik. And thank you to him for providing us with that music file. Let's go in and give the game one last play just to see what's going on here. So I've got my clouds flying in the background. I got my beautiful music here. And you can see that everything's working beautifully here. Let's just keep firing. I'm going to just have these guys point at each other, and I'm just going to start mashing the fire button and see if we can get a little... Yeah, we got a nice little battle going here now. You can see it takes quite a few shots to be able to get to each other. There we go. There's our first hit. You can see that our characters kind of fly around a little bit when they've been hit. That's something I haven't shown you. Let's go back to our cannon character here. So when our cannon gets hit in the cannonball here, they send out a message called health. And over on our cannon sprite here, I haven't shown you this part. When it receives that health command, it's health 2 for the left guy. What we're going to do is just have him kind of wiggle around a little bit and kind of discombobulate himself. So we're going to change our X back and forth just by a couple of pixels. And we're going to point in a random direction. I've created a range of motion here so that when he stops moving, he's going to end up like here or here. We do a little wait here so that we can see the different animation states. If we weren't waiting at all, if I didn't put this wait here, the 5 times through this repeat loop would just happen so fast that your eye couldn't see it. So that will kind of discombobulate you once you get hit, and just adds a little bit of extra difficulty to the game. So let's try this again. I'm just going to get these guys pointed and we'll get them shooting at each other. All right, there we go. We got rid of some of the background here, and let's see if we can actually hit each other here. All right, not having much luck so far. I'll just keep going. Whoa, I am bad at this game. So I'm not really simulating this game very effectively here. There we go. We hit ourselves there, and you can see how I flipped over once I got hit. It's going to take me a second to get myself back recombobulated again. Though you still can move your cannon while you're reorienting yourself. And you see things are working quite nicely here. I'm not going to hang around until the end of the game here. It's going to take us too long to actually calibrate this so that we're hitting each other. But trust me, it actually does work. Once your health gets down to 0, you'll see the winning screen here. This splash screen that's Chromeworks, you guys can design your own splash screen if you like. But I'm going to keep that one to myself, I think, so that the Chromeworks label only goes on my version of the game. So by all means, design your own little splash screen here. I'll show you the code for the thumbnail. It's just basically makes it fade out when you click the green flag or when you click on the sprite. So this is the way I do all my splash screens nowadays. So you can see that it unghosts itself as soon as I stop, so that I always see a splash screen here until I'm playing the game. Just a nice little function that I've been doing on all my Chromeworks releases lately. Okay, so I skipped over that last part, but I'm pretty sure that the code should be not that difficult to follow. I didn't want to go through the steps of for every single character changing all those variables around. If you get lost, if you're stuck, just have a look at the finished version of my game, which you'll be able to find the location for in the description for this file, or you can grab it off of my website as well. And if I'm ever stuck and there's just something I can't figure out, I just try to get both versions of the program up on my screen. I might flip it like this so that I'm only got half of the screen going here, and I'll just compare the code. Another thing you can do if you're really stuck is have my version open and drag the proper working version of the script. Let's say I'm working on my Cannonball script and I've got something wrong and I don't know what it is. Just grab this whole block and drag it into your backpack, and then you can go ahead in the non-working version of the game, delete this bit of code and drag it out of your backpack and put the proper working version of the code in. So use my finished version of the file just to get yourself caught up if you're having trouble with all these variables. As I said, I just didn't want to waste everyone's time going through changing 50 different variables around here. Just make sure that all your references are reversed here. So anything that said P1 cannon in the first sprite gets turned to P2 cannon in the second sprite, etc., etc. So I'm relying on you guys to try and fix this up a little bit on your own, and hope you don't get into too much trouble with that. I'm trying to keep the video length a little bit shorter here so I don't drone on for too long. Alrighty. So that was a really cool little lesson. I actually really enjoyed making this game, and I had a ton of fun playing it. So I'm going to recommend you guys grab a friend and try playing this. It's actually a lot of fun trying to dodge each other's bullets. The bullets are slow enough that you can actually move left and right to do it. Though, of course, if you can smash through the wall far enough, you can actually directly shoot your opponent in such a way that he can't dodge it. So that's another strategy, of course, that you can try. Try out the game and let me know what you think. Let me know if it's fun. Give me a like and a subscribe here if you can, and have fun making this. We'll be back next week with another great gaming tutorial. In the meantime, happy scratching.